this lecture we will see compute domain of AWS. As we discuss EC2. EC2 is the one of the most important compute service in AWS compute domain. But there are some different compute domain compute service also in this domain, that is Elastic Beanstalk and AWS Lambda. We will discuss in this lecture especially on AWS Lambda. Why AWS Lambda is separate service? We are going to discuss what AWS Lambda actually is. That is the AWS compute domain. So the main service are under this domain are EC2, Elastic Beanstalk and AWS Lambda. Now among these three, the most important service is EC2. So EC2 is basically just like a raw server. It is like a personal computer that we are working on remotely, right? So it can install any kind of operating system or our choice, which is supported by the AWS infrastructure, and then we can use it in any manner as we want. We can configure it to become a web server. We can configure it to become a work server in work environment, anything. Now next service is Elastic Beanstalk, actually which is an automated version of EC2. So with the Elastic Beanstalk we don't get the access to the operating system, but we still have control over the configuration of our system. So we can choose what kind of instance we want to launch, right? So Elastic Beanstalk is used to deploy an application. So basically we just upload our code and our application is deployed on the AWS infrastructure, right? So this is what Elastic Beanstalk is all about. Then we have the important which we will discuss more in this lecture, that is AWS Lambda service. So the Lambda service is again an automated version of EC2 where we don't get the access to the operating system. With the AWS Lambda we does not have even have the choice to choose what kind of configuration we want with our server, right? So with AWS Lambda we just have to upload our code and it execute. It's that simple. But then why do we have an AWS Lambda service when we have Elastic Beanstalk? So let us understand that. So AWS Lambda, like I told it is an automated version of EC2 just like Elastic Beanstalk, but then with AWS Lambda we can only execute background task, right? We cannot deploy an application. So AWS Lambda is not used to deploy an application. It is used to execute background tasks. Other than that, like I told you guys, we don't have to choose the configuration, and AWS Lambda we don't have to choose what kind of server we want on depending on our workload. Thus the kind of configuration, the server configuration is assigned to us, right? So this is why we use AWS Lambda. But then let's go on the definition part and see what AWS Lambda actually is. So according to its definition, actually it is a serverless compute service. Serverless compute service, because we are not choosing the server, right? We are not choosing what kind of resource we want in our server. It's a serverless compute service. We just upload our code and the code is executed. It is that simple, right? And also like it is mentioned in the definition, and I told you guys again, It is used to execute background tasks. It is not used to deploy an application, guy. This is the main difference between Elastic Beanstalk and AWS Lambda. AWS Lambda is used for background tasks. Beanstalk, AWS Elastic Beanstalk is used for deploy our application. And there is a lab related to AWS Lambda. We will discuss that on that lab we will create an AWS Lambda function. We will also create an Amazon event bridge event to trigger the function every minute. The function uses an AWS identity and access management rule. This rule allows the function to stop the AWS Elastic Compute Cloud, that is EC2. If we want to stop the any instance which is running in our account, that can be stopped by AWS Lambda. Also, if we upload, we can make that type of setup also. If we upload anything on S3, that S3 loaded thing mail to our email. This type of background tasks are done on the AWS Lambda actually. Okay, thank you for this lecture. And there are actually AWS provides some SDK. Through that SDK we can integrate different programming language to AWS. And AWS Lambda is providing some SDK. And currently there are two, Eclipse and Visual Studio. They are supported AWS SDK. Okay, and this is the control over all about AWS Lambda and its lab. And practical part is on description box. I will describe that video on description box. Okay, thank you guys.